This episode sponsored by Lake Monster Details, producing the Don's Light and Magic Legacy line of parts, offering upgrade parts and decals for accuracy, special effects, and lighting. Visit www.lakemonsterdetails.com and make it glow. Also sponsored by GCals, producing aftermarket replacement decals and custom quality graphics for your favorite spaceships. Visit www.gcals.company.site and add some personalization to your sci-fi models today. Also sponsored by Mask Design, boldly going where no masking kit has gone before. Take your model to the next level of detail and accuracy with a masking kit from Mask Design. Visit Mask Design on Facebook or click the ordering link in the notes below the video. Hey, what's up, fellow modelers? Will here. Welcome to the Engine's Chair. So this is the first episode. We are going to start working on the Oberth class USS Grissom, the 1350 from Polar Lights. It's been out for about a year now. There's been several other builds that people have done. And I'm not going to dilly-dally. There will be no dilly-dallying around on this build. We're going to get right into it. No preview videos, no pre-paint discussions about anything. We're just going to get into the build. We're going to work this out. I don't really have to do a whole lot of research on this because Gary has sent me over the masking kit from Mask Design, and it's a beautiful kit. He has the paint ratios all laid out, everything. I don't have to do any research. I just have to follow the build guide and the paint guide, and he's also got videos for it. So it's going to be a real simple paint, I hope. A lot of times people do videos and they make it look really easy, and then you get into it and it's like, how the heck did they do that? Well, I don't think that's going to be the case with this, but it's going to make it a lot easier for certain. That Gary's already got the build videos, he's got the paint ratios, and we've got these wonderful masks that he sent over to me that we're going to get to take a look at. And from what I've heard, this Oberth, this USS Grissom 1350 model is a real easy build. It goes together nicely. And the only thing I will mention is that lighting. I'm thinking about, I have a flasher board, which I was going to use for the A, but now I've got these other two boards. I've got the one Trek Modeler sent me. So now I've got this flasher board that I rescued from my poor Reliant 1537 that bit the dust when I moved back here from New Mexico back to Virginia. And I think I might use that on this because really you don't need a whole lot on this model. Yes, there's some boards out there that do the impulse engine pulsing and do something. I don't even know if any of them do anything with the warp grills, but we're gonna use the warp grills. We will talk about those here in a minute, but you don't need a whole lot with this. There's not. I think the only time you see any weapons firing is, I think, in First Contact, the Oberth that's in the battle scene there at the beginning of First Contact, I think, fires its weapons, if I'm remembering correctly. But you don't really have to get in. I don't even know if the model really took into consideration where it may be like a TOS thing where they had phasers firing, but they had no phaser turrets visible and no photon torpedo tube visible, even though they were firing these weapons. So I don't even know if I don't even think that was a consideration on the model itself. I'm going to have to take a look, but I haven't seen anything labeled as a photon torpedo tube or phaser bank on the Oberth class, but I haven't really looked at it too much yet. It's still in the box. I have opened the box and literally closed it back and didn't even pull out any parts and look at it. So I've done very little research on the history of the Oberth. I do know that it was built for Star Trek 3. It was used in a couple other. I think it appeared briefly in Star Trek 4 in the space dock scene, the dry dock scene, I believe. But Then it made some appearances in Next Generation. I think the one appearance in Emissary and Deep Space Nine, and it appears in Generations when they're doing the rescue from Veridian 3 after, at the end of the movie. But other than that, I think that's about it. But the photos I have was from a photo study that was done, and Modelers Miniatures and Magic. I'll put the link up for the studio photo reference photos, or studio model reference photos. But from what I've read and researched, there wasn't any real repaints. There was some touch-up painting done to it, I think, after Greg Jean made molds to make another Oberth class model. I think they had to do some paint touch-ups after that, but other than that, pretty much what you see in these pictures, other than the relabeling for the different ships, I think when it was sold off, it was still labeled as the Pegasus. We'll see it in these photos when I show some of them during the build. But as you see the model in these photos, it should be how it pretty much appeared in Star Trek 3 as the Grissom. So shouldn't be any problem with referencing those photos. But again, like I said, Gary's already laid out all the paint mixes and everything in his video and with his mask kit. So should make that pretty easy. Like I said, the lighting's going to be real simple. I'm just going to do the, I am going to have the navs and strobes. Now on the model itself, I believe the navs were steady on, but I am going to have mine blink just because I think I watched Boyd's video and he did the same thing. It's just a consistency thing. I don't see why the refit would have it. And if this model's going to be sitting next to my refit, which I'm working on now, there needs to be some consistency between it. I think that the navs should blink, even though they didn't on the studio model. But so simple board. I will say that I may order the board from Hobby Link International. If you remember on the Big Bird or Prey that I built, ultimately Spencer Wolf helped me out with doing getting the board done for the effects on that. And I shared the link for Hobby Link International's page where they actually have the Bird of Prey board, and they had some other boards, and Oberth is one of them. And it's a really good board. I think Boyd used that board, and Interstellar Modeler I think also used that board. It's a real simple board. It's a $20 board. I think it's really affordable. The only thing is with that, other than some of the other ones that you may get, is that you have to have your own lights and your own wiring, and you have to be kind of comfortable with a lot of soldering and that, but which I am. So I may look into ordering that board, or I may just use the blinker board that I already have. I've got it, might as well use it, and then I can always order one of those later. I can put the impulse engines as a steady on, as well as the warp engines, which I will be lighting up on this one. So stick with me. Let's get into it. Give me a minute. I'll put you on the bench. We'll get to work. All right, so here's everything I need to do this build. Outside, I've got my paints over here, which are on the list. Let's start about talking about Gary's paint kit here, masking set here from Mask Design. This is kit 9, by the way, and I'll have the link for the ordering form that you just click on, and it takes you to PayPal and lets you order this. That will be in the notes below, but it is kit 9 for the Oberth class mask set. Let's throw that over there. So you get several sheets. You get this nice card, which you see another one I've got right here, to lay down your mask. We'll look more at this as we go through it, but he does, in the instructions that you get with this, and it's available on his page as well, he does list all the paints that you need. They are craft paints, which, you know, if you've seen my videos, you know I love working with craft paints. They're easy to work with. They're easy cleaning up. They're non-toxic. You don't have to worry about a lot of fumes from them. So I love working with craft paints, and I love that Gary also loves working with craft paints, apparently because he does craft paints with all of his mask build videos. So glad we see eye to eye on that. So here is the kit. Not a whole lot, not as heavy for certain as the refit kit, but trust me, there's a lot in this kit, and like I said, we're going to see it. I will put a link also to Gary's build videos for this on YouTube. So look in the notes below for that as well. It talks about, it shows you this masking set, so you can get a good idea of what to expect from that. Now, in addition, before I get into the kit itself, Cass over Lake Monster Details has sent me his Oberth class warp chiller grills. And now we never saw these light up on the model. I think even in Generations, when it warps out, you don't even really get to see these light up. But Cass has these, and he's got the one thing I learned too: don't ever throw away the flap, because Cass likes to put the instructions on the flap, the inside flap. So don't throw this away. But you never actually see these light up, and but Cass has these. I got them in blue. I think he also has these in violet. Again, his link for his page is always in the notes below these videos, so take a look at that if you're interested in ordering these. I am going to light these up. These are clear, so that you can light them up. Where's my flashlight? And you can see those are transparent, so those will light up nice. I have some ideas on what to do with this, because I think this is a black color on the studio model. So my thought is do this very similar to the refit chiller grills, in that the the raised areas, I believe, are black, but the center areas, what I may do is I got some of this transparent black. It's like a smoke. We're going to smoke it up, but only with paint. We're going to smoke it up with the paint. It's a transparent black, so it's kind of like a smoke. You can get a smoke color, transparent color in Tamiya and all those, but again, this is water based, so I don't have to worry about the fumes as much with this stuff as I would with an acrylic, your usual acrylics or your hobby paints. So I think this will work well. I can use this, I can smoke this, and it's going to look black, and on top of that I will black out the raised areas, so you just get the light coming through the recessed areas, which is how it is on the refit model chiller grills. So again, just trying to get some consistency in how these are lighting up, and plus I think they'll look really cool like that, so we shall see. But that's my plan for that. I have to locate the nav board that I was going to use, because since I moved in here, I boxed up some stuff, and now I don't know which box I put it in. So I'll have to find that, but I don't need that right now. What I need to do now is, I have seen Boyd's build, and I think Interstellar Modeler's build, and maybe one other build. I did look at a couple builds just to see kind of how they were starting out and what they were starting off with. And it looks like most of the time they're starting off with this pontoon part on the bottom here. I'm not sure if I'm going to do that, or if I'm going to start with the way this is assembled, because I know Gary, in his instructional videos for painting this, he starts with the upper section. And what I need to look at is kind of plan out, and you got to do this anytime you do a model build. You really kind of need to look at the model and plan out. Have a plan of attack, you know, as far as what's the easiest way to do this. If I can paint this upper section and then assemble it without having to do a lot of seam work, then that's fine. But if I've got to do a lot of seam work, I don't really want to paint it until it's assembled, which means I also have to do the lighting on the internal lighting on this as well. So I got to kind of look this over, figure out how I want to attack this myself. Like I said, I did look at a couple other videos just to see and get an idea of how other people are working on this model, but I'm going to do it my way. So, and that may be similar to what the way other people do it, but we'll see. So one problem you do have, and I've got rod, so I'm not worried about this, but it gives you a solid rod for this, which is kind of odd that they make a kit for lighting, because the windows are all open and everything, and they give you these clear windows, but then they give you a rod that is solid so that you can't run the wiring through. So I don't know, but I've got replacement rod already that I can use in place of that, so it's not a big deal. We have clear windows. Now, if you've seen my builds before, you know I like to have flush windows, so I will insert these and see how they look. But if they're not flush, I'm probably going to end up using UV resin and filling them in and sanding them flat and flush with the hole. And then if I've got to make my own window masks for that, I will, which may be difficult because these are really small windows. But I'll take a look at that. I like having flush windows, and we'll see how these look. If they don't look bad, I'll go with those. But if they suck, then I will use UV resin. And these are, yeah, I may have to use the kit windows because these are really small. And I can tell you that my Cricut machine, anything smaller than about 2 or 3 millimeters, and it starts having an issue with making consistent cuts. The only saving grace with these is that these are square and not round. It does a little bit, I can go a little bit smaller with square masks than I can with round. Round it just never makes a nice round circle on it when I try to get below like 2 or 3 millimeters. So I'll take a look at that. We'll figure that out. If I have to use the kit windows, I will. But again, that's a consideration I got to make when I assemble this, because if I have to use the kit windows, well, that means I got to insert them. It's not like I can put like UV resin or anything and put it in after it's painted and just kind of do it that way. So the kit windows have to be in, which means these have to be masked when I paint, or I've got to paint first, then insert the windows. Which, I mean, it's possible. Like I said, if there's not a whole lot of seam work that needs to be done, then that'll be the way to go. So again, I'll have to look at these. Not a whole lot of parts with this model compared to some of like the refit or something like that. So it looks like it's a little bit simpler of a model kit. It does look nice and clean. I don't see a whole lot of flashing. You've got some really small parts here. But yeah, it looks good. So let me take a look at this and look at some reference photos and look at Gary's mask guide and kind of put a plan of attack together here, and we'll come back and we'll take a look at what I'm doing. Stay tuned. All right, so just an observation. I noticed that these the connecting pins on these are really thick. So I'll tell you what, you got to be careful with, I would not recommend bending these back and forth to try. I never do, but especially on this, I've got my snips and I'm cutting it away from the part itself. That way I can come in and kind of sand it and file down, because the pins are the connecting pins are just so thick on these that it's, yeah, I definitely will not try to work these back and forth and break these parts off, because you might actually break one of the parts. They're just really wide, and these I actually took my micro saw to and cut because they were very wide. I'm like, you know, really got some really large connectors on these things. And here's those the warp chiller grills, which I won't need the kit part. They're solid, opaque in the kit part, so I won't need those. But so I've got the upper and lower parts cut off. I've got to cut the rest off, but I just wanted to make a mention of that. If you haven't worked on this kit yet, there's some very thick connecting pin, and they actually run up into the plastic. So yeah, you're gonna have to, unless these break off easy, but I'm afraid to do it. I'm afraid it's gonna take a chunk of plastic out. So I'm gonna take the slow approach to these. But anyway, you guys that worked on these and maybe broke these pins off, did they come off flush? Is it just the way I'm looking at it that maybe it just breaks off easy? I don't know. I'm afraid to bend it and break it, because I'm afraid it's going to take a chunk of plastic out, and then I got more work to do. So anyway, I'm going to continue getting these parts out and continue taking a look at it and figure out how I want to approach this build. So give me a little bit longer. All right, I wasn't wrong. So I was trying to do this what I thought was the correct way and cut it off, and look, I bit a chunk right there on this corner. So now, of course, I've got to glue that back in place and putty and sand it before I can even get started. Welcome to my channel, welcome to my world. It's the World of Will. Yes, stealing it from World of Wayne. Great guy, by the way, if you haven't met him. So I've got to fix that now before I can even make any headway on this. So give me a little bit and I'll fix my my little boo-boo there, and we'll get back on the road heading in the right direction. All right, so here's what I've done so far. I've started doing my my light blocking, and usually I light block from the inside and that's fine, and then I'll do like seams or that I'll light block with black. But the problem I had was there's some spots where the black paint just wasn't getting into some of these grooves on this side, and the same issue with the fins on this side. So I just decided to go ahead and paint both sides black and light block it that way. That way I'm doubly sure that I won't have any light leaks. So that's all done. I've got that light block. I'm going to let this sit overnight and dry before I put the white primer coat on it. So I'm letting these sit. Now I told you I had to come up with a plan of attack. So my plan is, you have two options the way I see it. You can either use the kit supplied windows or you don't. Now if you're going to use the kit supplied windows, unless you're going to do all this, pre-paint all this before you put it together, which I don't like to do, because then you inevitably you end up with a seam somewhere that you didn't plan on, and now you've got to putty it, sand it, and then you've got to reblend everything back in, and I don't like to do that if I can avoid it. So although I will say that it looks like a lot of the seams on these are well hidden, and Polar Lights really did a good job of making these to where the seams where they go together are really nice. They look like they'll go together real nice, and you won't get a whole lot of light leaks at the seams. But I still prefer to just not have to worry about all that. So what I've decided to do is, now I talked to Gary at Mask Design, because watching his videos I had asked him, I had assumed that since he was painting the silver domes on the top and the bottom after the kit was together, and after he'd done most of the panel painting and all that, I'd assumed that he didn't use the kit windows, and he said that's correct. He doesn't care to use kit windows, which is fine, because hey, I don't care to use kit windows either. If you've seen any of my videos, most of the time I prefer to fill in the windows with UV resin and then sand them flush. That's not really an option with this kit, because you've got all these fine panel lines around the windows, and you're going to destroy these panel lines if I try to do it the way that I usually do them. So in talking to Gary, he just said that usually he'll use either a clear parts glue, or like I've got micro crystal clear here, and that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to do all the painting on this, get it done, and then I'll come back with a toothpick or whatever, some with a fine point, and I'll fill all these windows in with micro crystal clear, and I'll do the windows that way. That way I don't have to worry about masking, because these would be, I don't want to say impossible, but they'd be a real pain if you could get window masks to cut that small, which I know my Cricut won't. So rather than to worry about that, I'm going to leave the windows out like Gary did and do it that way. Now the other option is, if you love kit windows and you absolutely have to have the kit windows, your other option is to paint this part, do your white, and then do your silver at least, and then this part you can always do after, because you'd mask this off anyway. But do your white, do your silver. That way you don't have to worry about, this is already painted, you don't have to worry about messing with any of this, and then do your silver dome here. And then you can just follow Gary's steps from there. As far you're just doing these ahead of time, so that way you can use the kit windows. But you would do all that, then assemble the kit, and then paint it the way Gary's videos go. So that's the other option if you really have to have the kit windows. I don't. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of kit windows. A lot of times they just don't fit real well. I'm not saying that about these, because from what I've heard, these fit pretty well, but you know, I tend to like flush windows, and the only way really to get a nice flush window is to fill it with the UV resin and sand it. But again, since that's not an option, the next best thing is do like Gary did with his, and just paint the whole thing and come back in with some I'll come in with my micro crystal clear and make the windows that way. So that's my 2 cents on that. Take it or leave it. It's up to you how you want to do it. So I've done all the light blocking on this, and I've got some other parts. Well, let's talk about these for a minute, because these have to dry. These parts have to dry now, and I need to get these primered. But we've got to talk about this part here, because as far as I can tell, this is the only part. Oops, I'm going to knock stuff over. This is the only part where you've really got, let me get this out the way, where you've really got a seam that you really have to deal with. And so I've got this glued together already. And I will mention that if you have a hard time getting this to go together, this middle pin right here, my pin where that goes in was actually a little oversized and it would not go inside the hole. So I actually had to take a piece of sandpaper and sand it a little bit, make it a little bit smaller so it would fit in the hole there. And then after that, this went together just fine. So I did my glue, put it together, held it together till it was solid. And then what I like to do when I have seams like this, I want to reinforce it. So what I'll do is what I did is I'll take some of my CA glue, I'll run a bead all the way down this, and then I will hit that with my kicker, and that'll lock that all in. That'll make that solid. You got a nice solid seam now. I just don't like to just run a bead and then put the parts together, because sometimes you don't get a solid connection all the way. So I'll run the bead, put it together, and then I'll run a solid bead that I can actually see all the way down this seam, and then I'll hit it with the kicker, and that'll lock it in, and it'll be a good tough seam. So what I've got to do to this part now is I've got to work on this seam here, because like I said, this is the only major seam. The good thing about it is these panel lines, I don't know if Round 2 did this on purpose, knowing that we're going to have to work on this seam, or if that's the way it is. I haven't looked on the studio model to see if these lines don't go all the way anyway, but this panel line doesn't go all the way, so you're not going to hurt anything by sanding this. There's no seams or no panel lines or anything to hurt with it. So what I'm going to do is, the way I like to do these seams is I'll take a piece of tape, and we can actually, I'm not going to do it, we'll just use the whole piece of tape. Usually what I'll do is I'll put this down and cut it. That way, because I only need one straight part there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this along the seam on one side. And I'll take a piece of tape and I'll run it down the seam on the other side. And most of you are familiar with doing this, but if you don't know why I do this, it's because when I put down my Bondo glazing and spot putty, I won't have a big mess. It'll it'll sit down in this shallow pit that's created by putting this tape on there, and when I peel the tape up, I'm going to do with my little spatula to put the spot and glaze putty down. When I pull the tape up, I'll have a nice smooth straight seam here that when I sand it, I want to worry about sanding all over the place, because the putty went all over the place when I put the putty down. But I don't know what I did with my my little spatula. The head sitting up here. Well laid plans. So it's alright, I'll just make a little spatula off one of these pieces. But yeah, so that it helps keep it real clean. You don't have a lot of the mess that you would otherwise possibly have. I don't need that anymore, so I'll take some of this and we'll just run it right down. Because like I said, this tape will keep this little spatula that I'm using to put this Bondo down just off of the surface of the model, and I'll get a nice thin bead of putty on there. So don't press down too much, because if you press down real hard on it, you'll end up in some of these spots it's going to happen anyway, because the seam might not be even from the glue. I'm just going to run this bead all the way up this. Try not to take too long with this. I know it'd bore you all to death sitting here watching me do this. But some of you may not be familiar, especially if you're new to modeling, you may not be familiar with doing seams this way. Try not to fill that hole in right there. There's a hole for a strobe light right there that you gotta kind of work around. I mean, it's not a big deal if you fill it in. You just poke it back open with a a needle, or you poke it back open with a small drill bit or something. It's not that big of a deal if you accidentally fill that in. All right. Do that there. So now I will let that set up a little bit. But while that's setting up, let's talk about something else. So from watching some of the other videos, I know that where's that part at? This front, I guess, sensor dome for the little pontoon there, it goes in the front here, but the instructions want you to put this part in as you're gluing this section together. But what I found is you can glue this together and still slide this part into place if you leave this end open. Leave this end open, and the other trick is to cut out, let me focus here, on the back section here. If you just cut out a little bit of this corner on each side, it'll let you slide it in, because if you don't, you've got these tabs here and it won't let you slide it in like I just did. But if you cut out that corner right there, it'll let you slide this right into place, just like that. So if we need to do something else to this, if we need to do some work, if you want to paint this separate, which I don't think you really have to, Gary's masks were made to paint this in place, but I know some people like to paint this separate. So it's just a little trick. If you want to be able to paint this separate, just cut a little notch in that corner on the back, each of the corners on the back end of this, and that way you can just slide this in and out. It wouldn't be bad either if it would work, but it won't, because once I put this won't pop out. But it would be nice if you could pop this in and out to be able to access the pontoon if you need to. But now once you glue this front end in place, it's not going to come out. So, but it's just an option I want to put out there in case anybody's interested and they want to paint that separate and put it in later for whatever reason. But this should be set up enough for me to pull this tape off. Doesn't have to be completely dry, just dry enough to where it's not going to peel off with the tape. All right, there we go. And you got one nice straight even seam there that I can sand now, and it should be good to go. So I'll have to let that set up overnight, let that dry, and I'll come back to that in the morning and work on that. And the only other thing I want to go over real quick before I shove this off to tomorrow morning, I had mentioned that these sprues are really thick where they connect to the model at, and what I found was I accidentally I think it was this piece here. I can't even tell because I fixed it, and now I've been sanded it smooth and painted it, so I can't tell. But one of those corners, it started to break the plastic part of the piece itself. So what I've been doing since is taking my nippers and cutting these out away from the model piece itself, so that way I still got a little bit of a stub on there. And just come in, cut it away from the model, so that way I don't damage the piece itself. And once I've done that, I'll come in with my hobby knife and I'm going to take this down as much as I can comfortably without it nicking the part itself. So I will get this work down. Just be careful, don't cut your finger off like I almost did. I ain't gonna lie to you. Actually what happened was, here's the dumb thing. So I was doing this and I got some, you see how I got plastic bits on there? I went and grabbed the blade to clean the blade off, and instead of grabbing it on the side, I grabbed it on the front and cut my finger. So never say I don't make stupid mistakes. But so be careful when you're doing that. Don't hurt yourself, especially if I've got some youngsters watching these videos doing models. I don't want you going and telling your parents that I told you to grab the blade and cut yourself. So anyway, I'll cut it down. I'll bring it down as much as I can like that, and then the rest of the way I'll just take a piece of sandpaper. This is about 220 grit sandpaper, and then I'll just keep checking it, and I will just sand this until it's nice and even, and I can't tell that there was a sprue connection there anymore. So that's how I've been doing those connections to make sure I don't damage the model or nick any more of it like I already have. So just figured I'd share that tip in case you're new to modeling and haven't done much with cutting things clean from sprues. I definitely, again, like I said, don't try to twist these from these sprues, because these sprues are really thick, and especially like these little thin fragile parts here, you will break them. So get you a pair of nippers. Even a pair of scissors will work on this, but the nippers are better because they've got a tougher blade, and you won't have to struggle as much with cutting some of these thicker sprues. But get your pair of nippers, cut them off away from the model piece, use your hobby knife to kind of trim a little more off, and then use your sandpaper to sand it flush, so that way you're not damaging anything. But other than that, guys, I do want to share one other thing real quick. Really the only clear piece I'm going to be using off of this tree, because I'm not going to be using the little pieces that insert for the lights. I'm going to put the SMDs in place for the navs and strobes, and then I will fill that hole with, I'll either use the micro crystal clear, or I'll use a little drop of UV resin, so I can get a little raised bump on there. But so I won't use those. The only thing I'm going to use is, well, I got to use these corner pieces for the back of this part. But other than that, I'll use this impulse engine and this clear piece for the impulse engine. But what I want to do is, while I've got this off, and let's clip this off here, clip this off here, and again, we use the knife to take it down a little bit. But what I want to do real quick before I attach this part is I'm going to take a piece of tape, and I would let's see, I don't know where my pencil is. Well, I don't know where I put my pencil at, so we'll see if I can do it with this pen. But what I want to do is I'm going to lay this piece down, and if I can hold it still enough, I'm going to kind of outline a piece of tape so that I can make a paint mask with this. And I'm going to do this a couple times just to make sure, in case I mess one up. Alright, now I've got an outline there, so I can make it'll be a little easier for me to make a mask for this. And what I am going to do, so I don't lose this clear piece, is I'm going to put a piece of tape on it, and I'm going to tape it right in front of me on my desk. And watch Watch, I go to look for this piece. I will not be able to figure out where I put it. As a matter of fact, let me write on here, so I don't think this is just a piece of spare tape. Impulse. So, but watch, when I go to look for this piece, it'll be staring me right in the face right here, and I won't be able to find it because I taped it up there right in front of me like an idiot. So, but anyway, guys, that's what I'm working on. I'm going to continue. I got to light block these parts. I got to cut the other one of this off. I got to light block this. I've got to wait till this. I can actually light block the inside while that's drying. So I got to light block this part and light block the upper part of this, which is really not a whole lot of light in this. It might be a little overkill to light block it, but I just want to make sure that because really all that's in here is your nav and your strobes are in this bottom pontoon. You don't have any real lighting other than that I can think of. But I still want to light block it just to make sure I don't get any light leaks. So I'm going to work on finishing light blocking this stuff. And after this stuff sits overnight tonight, I will come in. I'm getting plastic all over everything. I'll come and put my first white coat on, and I'll pick back up after I'm at that point, after I've got that first white coat of primer on. So give me a bit. It's going to be a night or two for me, but just a couple minutes for you. So see you soon. All right, guys, so I've got these parts painted up. I primed them with the Rust-Oleum 2X Ultra Cover Flat White Primer, which is what Gary recommends using as the base for this. So I've got these primed up. These are going to have to sit a while. I've still got a couple other parts that I'm working on. I got some parts over there that are just freshly painted, and I've got a couple more parts that I've got to paint yet. So these are going to have to sit for a while. I'm not going to touch these, well, any more than I already have, for at least 2 days. I don't want to do anything with I'm not going to put any masks on these or anything for at least a couple days. Let them get a nice good dry to them. I will show you real quick, if I can pick this up without handling it too much, that my seam came along really well on here. So got that taken care of. I will say, for those of you that are just getting into modeling and haven't dealt with seams much, so I already showed you how I go about masking this off and then putting the putty on. And then what I do is when I go and sand my seams like this, I just come across the seam. You don't want to go this way with it because you're really not going to get the seam evened out, because if there is a step to it and you put that putty on there, all you're going to be doing is sanding it evenly with that step to it. So I always come across it this way. And with this one in particular, I came up and then down a couple times, and then I'd clean it off and I'd put a primer coat and see how it looked, and if it still looked like it needed some more work, I'd do it again. I'd sand it again. I'd start out, the first thing I do is I start out with a really rough grit, and I don't do this for long because you can wear out the model a bit, but this is a 100 grit sandpaper, and you don't really have to go that harsh. I think there's like a 180 or something like that, but I use 100 grit, and I just go up and down it maybe 2 or 3 times, and that's it with the 100 grit. And then I'll come over it with the 220, I think it is, and then a 400 grit, and I'll see how it looks. The 400 is really about as fine as you need to go on this. It's not really going to do you much good to go with like a 1000 or 2000 grit. Now, what you might want to use a 1000 or 2000 grit is after you get your coat of paint on it, and if it looks good, but there's maybe just a little bit, you can still tell just a little bit where the seam is. I'll put what I've been using is, I don't have it sitting in front of me, but I've got a filler primer, and what I'll do is I'll put a coat of filler primer on this, and I'll let that dry real good, and then I'll come across it and sand it some more, come back over it again with the filler primer if it needs it, sand it some more, and then once it looks good, then I'll put the final coat, which is this flat white primer. And if I put that on, and because different primers sometimes can pick up the reflections a little bit differently, and you can see things that maybe you couldn't see with a gray or a black primer. So if I put the white on and I can still see it a little bit, then I'll use like a 1000 grit sandpaper, and I'll sand it a little bit, and then come over it again with the white. And that's what I did here, and it turned out really nice. You can't even see the seam on it anymore. And then keep in mind too that when we go to paint this, there's going to be a stripe that goes, I believe there's a stripe that goes right down the middle of this. I don't know if that's the decal or if that's the paint, but there's a stripe that goes right down the middle of this, so that's going to help hide that too. So That's done, and I also want to point out that on this, before I primed and light blocked this, I did put those, I don't know what these are. I don't know if these are supposed to be doors or what, but I did attach those before I went and did all the priming. Got a little hair right there. And that way they get light blocked and everything at the same time, because if I wait till after and I glue this, then if I don't get a good seal at the bottom here, you can end up with a light leak under that. So I make sure I get that good and sealed, and then hit it with the primer, black it out, and then come over it with the white like it needs to be. And the other thing I'll point out on here is you'll see this disc on here. Now I'm going to talk about that when we go to start doing the lighting. We should be doing that next episode. But basically I cut out a disc here because my plan is, and this one's already pretty dry. This is the first one I painted, so this one's pretty good. But my plan is, you'll see a lot of people do these builds and they put the LED lights, they put the strip tape right in the middle here facing up. And then what happens sometimes, if you don't do like if you don't take some paint or something to diffuse the light, you'll get bright spots in these windows as you move the model around and look at it. So what I want to do is, I'm going to take my light strips and I'm actually going to stick them in this ring right here, this flat part around the ring. And that'll put the light down, and because I've got white here, that'll reflect it back up into these windows. But at the same time, I've got this disc here, and it's a clear disc. I got primer on it when I was priming it, and that's fine. I'll take a little bit of thinner, and I'm going to clean that off because I want it transparent. Because I've already sanded it to give it some diffusion. And what my thought is, and we'll see how well it works, when that lower dome, which is over there drying right now, that section with the smaller lower dome that has windows in it, the lights will shine through this piece of plastic that I've got on here that I've diffused, and it'll light that up, but you won't get the hot spots in it. So that's my theory anyway. We'll see how it works out when we actually start doing the lighting on the next episode. I think this episode's already getting kind of long, and like I said, it's going to be a couple days before I can actually start putting masks on this and start doing the masking and following Gary's guides as far as doing that. So next episode we should be looking at doing a little bit of lighting. We've got to do just the strip lighting in here, and then pretty much everything else is just SMDs for the strobes and for the navigational lights. So it's a pretty simple model to light. It should be. It's not going to be a whole lot of lights to it, and it should be a pretty quick procedure. So anyway, guys, I appreciate everybody's been watching these, giving me feedback, and thank you everybody for hopefully getting some use out of these videos. But thank you for watching these and asking questions and making comments and things. I appreciate that. So if you haven't subscribed already, you don't have to, but please, if you like these videos, if you're getting use out of them, please hit that subscribe button below. And then you can hit that little bell icon if you want to get the updates automatically. And if you don't want to subscribe, just give me a thumbs up down there if you get something useful out of this video if you don't want to subscribe. So I appreciate it. Again, thank you to Gary over at Mass Design for sending me the masks that we're going to be using on this. And thank you to Cass over at Lake Monster Details for these warp grill the warp grills that we're going to start looking at working on here. Probably next video I'll probably start working on these and getting these painted up the way I'm imagining them. But also make sure you pay some attention. Show Gus over there at GCal some love. I don't think I'm going to be using any of his decals on this build, but we will be looking at some of his decals on some of the other builds coming up. And also on that refit he's working on, or the Enterprise A, he's working on some decals for that as well, some Aztec decals that are coming along nice last time I saw them. So anyway, guys, thank you again. Until next time, keep modeling.